She was born in Germany to a Jewish family on June 4th, 1928. She died a year ago on July 12th, 2024, at the age of 96. This coming Wednesday will be the first yahrzeit of her passing. At the age of 10, she was sent to Switzerland by her parents to escape to safety. Her parents were killed in the concentration camps. And at the age of 17, she made Aliyah to what was then Palestine. Although she was only 4 feet 7 inches tall, she joined the Haganah, the nascent Jewish Defense Army, and trained to be a sniper. On her 20th birthday, she was wounded in action by an exploding shell during mortar fire on Jerusalem during the War for Independence. And she almost lost both her feet. During her years in Israel, she not only became an outstanding marksman, she also became fluent in Hebrew. In 1950, she studied psychology at the Sorbonne in Paris, under the tutelage of the famous Jean Piaget. In 1956, she immigrated to the United States and worked as a maid to put herself through graduate school in New York. And finally, in 1970, she had earned her doctorate from Teachers College at Columbia University. Now, if you haven't guessed it already, I'm talking about Dr. Ruth Westheimer, often known as just Dr. Ruth. Dr. Ruth started out teaching psychology and having a private practice specializing in human intimacy. But she began her media career in 1980 with a radio talk show program called Sexually Speaking. That show was on the radio for 10 years, and then in 1983, it was the top-rated radio program in the largest radio market. She then launched her own TV program called simply Dr. Ruth Show. By 1985, she had attracted 2 million viewers each week. She became known for giving serious advice while being candid, but also warm, cheerful, funny, and respectful, and for her tag phrase, "get some." I think she meant candy, I don't know. But by the way, I do not plan on giving any examples of her wisdom tonight, just in case you were wondering. Although our rabbis taught that it is a special mitzvah on Shabbat, so to speak, this is still a family-oriented service. Fortunately, for anyone who is curious, you can buy one of her 43 books on the subject. I assume that many of them are available at Amazon. You can also watch a movie about her called Ask Dr. Ruth, which is available on Hulu. And if we're lucky, someday the play that was written about her life, which is called Becoming Dr. Ruth, may come to Houston. Dr. Ruth herself was married 3 times. The first time to an Israeli soldier and medical student, that lasted for 5 years, and the second time briefly to a man with whom she had a daughter, Miriam. She said each of her marriages played an important role in her relationship advice. But after 2 divorces, it was her 3rd marriage, at age 32, to fellow Holocaust survivor Manfred Westheimer, that was the real marriage. Fred, too, had escaped Nazi Germany. Their marriage lasted for 36 years until his death in 1997. Throughout her life, Dr. Ruth maintained her close connection to Israel, returning there virtually every year. And in 1993, she and an Israeli TV host, Arad Nir, hosted a talk show in Hebrew titled Min Tochnit on Channel 2. The show was similar to her U.S. Sexually Speaking show. The name of the show, Min Tochnit, is a play on words in Hebrew. It literally could mean a kind of program, but min in Hebrew also means sex or gender. Anyway, by coincidence, Diane and I happened to be in Israel that year, and late one night I was up flipping the 2 channels that existed at the time, and I just happened to see Dr. Ruth on TV. Who knew? To my surprise, there she was, doing her talk show on Israeli TV in fluent Hebrew, of course. 2 years later, Diane and I were living in Riverdale when I was in rabbinical school, which is just north of Manhattan. We were going regularly to that conservative synagogue in Riverdale for Shabbat services. And one Shabbat, as we were leaving the synagogue, I noticed a very short, familiar-looking older woman. Sure enough, there was Dr. Ruth. I went up to her and I said, "Dr. Ruth, I'm a big fan of yours. In fact, while I was in Israel, I watched your show on TV." She gave me a big smile. And then I added, "You know, I learned a lot of Hebrew words that I didn't learn in Ulpan." She laughed in a way that only Dr. Ruth could laugh. Turns out Dr. Ruth lived in Washington Heights, which is just south of Riverdale, in Manhattan. She was a member of that conservative synagogue in Riverdale, and she probably came there often, but for some reason, we only saw her there that one time. In 1997, the American Jewish Committee had published an ad in the New York Times. The ad included this quotation from Dr. Ruth. "Yes, Nazis destroyed my family, including my beloved parents and grandparents, but they couldn't eradicate my will to live and pass on to my children and grandchildren my love for Judaism, Israel, and the Jewish people. For me, the phrase, Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish people lives, holds special meaning." I think what made Dr. Ruth so unique and what made her such a celebrity was her unabashed honesty. She spoke plainly about subjects that many people felt uncomfortable talking about, but at the same time wanted advice about. But she also had a positive personality. She seemed always ready to laugh or just to smile. She was playful, thoughtful, and kind. And perhaps because of her height, she wasn't thought of as being threatening. She even mentioned that once in an interview. Her German accent made her sound like an Ashkenazic Jewish grandmother. But for Jews, I think we can also remember her for three additional things. First, she was a Holocaust survivor with a traumatic childhood. She was an orphan before she became a teenager, but she was determined to make her life meaningful despite her terrible loss. With grit and determination, she worked hard at low-wage jobs to put herself through school. She also had assistance from various Jewish philanthropic organizations. And she found her calling because she was able to help thousands of people live happier lives. Life is not always fair, and many good people suffer for no apparent reason. But to the extent we are able, we can try to use our energy, our talent, and our creativity to make the most of the life that we're blessed to live. Dr. Ruth can be an example of inspiration for the rest of us. Second, she always cherished her Jewish identity. She traveled to Israel regularly. She was proud of her Jewish heritage and her service to the state of Israel when she was only a teenager. She continued to attend synagogue on a regular basis for the rest of her life. She was immersed in the Jewish community in New York, and that gave her great satisfaction. And finally, she saw everyone as a full human being. Our tradition teaches us that we are all created in the divine image, and Dr. Ruth always gave advice that reflected that important value, even if she didn't say so explicitly. She did not believe that anyone should be coerced into a physical relationship, but that we need to have respect for ourselves and not allow others to cross our boundaries. But at the same time, she recognized that intimacy is an essential part of the human experience and should be enjoyed in its proper context and at the proper time. And this included respect for the LGBTQ community, which is important for this evening, Pride Shabbat weekend. The Hebrew name Ruth comes from the Hebrew word for friendship or companionship. The biblical Ruth displays extraordinary compassion towards her mother-in-law, Naomi, when Naomi lost her husband and her two sons. Naomi was bereft of her family, and Ruth was determined to stay with Naomi and to care for her for the rest of her life. Dr. Ruth lost her family at a very early age, and from that shattering experience, she was determined to help others find meaning and happiness in their lives. And so tonight we can say, Zichrona Livracha, may Dr. Ruth's memory be an everlasting blessing.